used to live in a small village in Pakistan, a quiet place surrounded by sugarcane fields and farmland. It was the kind of village where everyone knew each other, and nothing ever really changed until the graveyard incident started. It began with rumors. Graves were being tampered with, and whole bodies, coffins and all, were disappearing. Some people thought it was grave robbers desperate enough to dig up the dead. But then the livestock started turning up dead. Goats, chickens, even cows, found drained of blood, with no signs of a struggle. The more it happened, the less it made sense. There were no footprints, no claw marks, no evidence at all. The villagers went to the police, but they didn't take it seriously. A few officers came by, looked around, and left. Nothing changed. That's when the villagers decided to take matters into their own hands. Some started putting iron cages over the graves of their loved ones. Others stayed up late, keeping watch from their windows. And then they came to me. I used to be in the military. Nothing fancy, just a few years of service before I came back home. I guess that made me the tough guy in the village, the one people looked to when they didn't know what else to do. They asked me to keep watch over the graveyard at night. I didn't want to do it, but I also didn't want to let them down. These were my neighbors and my friends. If I didn't help, who would? But I wasn't going out there alone. I had Shayru, my dog, a huge crossbreed, part local hound, part something bigger. Shayru was strong, smart, and loyal. I figured with him by my side, I could handle anything. The first few nights were uneventful. The graveyard was eerie, sure, but nothing happened. No noises, no shadows, just me, Shayru, and the wind. I started to think the whole thing was just paranoia. But then came that night. The storm had been building all day. By the time I got to the graveyard, the sky was almost black, and the air felt thick, like it was hard to breathe. The wind was cold and sharp, carrying the faint smell of rain and wet earth. The graveyard was massive, split into two sections. The larger part was closer to the village, while the smaller section was across a field, about 100 meters away. A narrow, uneven path connected the two, flanked by sugarcane fields on either side. Both sections were surrounded by tall brick walls with rusty iron gates. Over the years, the walls had started to crumble in places, leaving gaps big enough for someone, or something, to slip through. I made my usual rounds, checking the graves with Shayru by my side. The iron cages glinted faintly in the dying light, and the first drops of rain started to fall. Thank God I had my umbrella. I sent Shayru to patrol the smaller section while I stayed in the larger one. He knew the area well, and I trusted him to alert me if anything seemed off. I settled into the caretaker's room, a small, damp shack at the edge of the graveyard. The chair creaked under my weight as I sat down, flashlight in hand. I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling that had been growling in my chest all day. It was sometime past midnight when I first heard it. At first I thought it was the wind, but then it came again. A faint scraping sound, like something being dragged across the ground. I stopped and listened. The sound was coming from the graveyard, near the banyan tree, a spot I'd checked earlier in the night. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. I grabbed my umbrella and flashlight, stepping out into the rain. The air was cold, and the rain had started coming down harder. The flashlight shook a little in my hand as I walked. The sound got louder as I got closer. It wasn't random. It was steady, almost rhythmic. I gripped the umbrella tighter, trying to focus the beam of light ahead. The rain kept hitting the umbrella, loud and sharp, making it hard to hear anything else. My boots squished in the wet mud. I aimed the flashlight toward the banyan tree, and that's when I saw it. A grave, half open. Fresh dirt was scattered everywhere. I felt my heartbeat in my head. Near the freshly dug grave was a figure. At first, I thought it was a person crouched low, digging. But as I got closer, still under cover, I realized it wasn't using a shovel. It was clawing at the dirt with its bare hands. Moving so fast, the soil was flying. Something about it felt wrong. Its limbs were too long, its movements too jerky, like it wasn't fully in control of its body. I shone my flashlight on it, but the beam flickered, as if the rain and darkness were swallowing the light. The figure didn't react. It just kept digging, its head tilted downward, completely focused on the grave. I blew my whistle, both to scare it off and to call Shay Rue back. Shay Rue's bark echoed through the rain as he came charging toward me, his massive frame cutting through the darkness. I silently pointed at the figure for Shay Rue to attack. Shay Rue didn't hesitate at first, but then the figure turned. My dog froze. I think I saw its face, but I couldn't see it clearly. Just shadows where its features should have been. But whatever it was, it made Shay Rue, my fearless dog, whimper and back away. Then, to my horror, Shay Rue bolted, disappearing into the rain. My legs felt like they were glued to the ground, my flashlight shaking in my hand. I decided to call the police, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone. I told them to come quickly, but silently. The rain was pounding now, and I crouched behind a gravestone, trying to keep my flashlight steady. It felt like forever, but eventually, they arrived. Their flashlights lit up the graveyard, and that's when they saw it, the figure, still crouched by the grave like nothing was happening. "What is that?" one of the officers whispered. Nobody moved for a moment. Then, one of them shouted for it to stop. The thing didn't even flinch. "Get up! Hands in the air!" Still nothing. And then, they fired near it. The crack of gunfire echoed through the graveyard, mixing with the sound of the rain. Finally, the figure bolted, moving faster than anything I'd ever seen. I don't know what made me do it, but I ran out from my cover, joining the officers as we chased after it. The flashlight beam shook wildly in my hand as I tried to keep up. One of the bullets must have hit it, because it let out a scream, this horrible, gut-wrenching sound. It was like a man, but not. There was something else mixed in, something animal-like. I can't even describe it. We chased it all the way to the wall. That's when it leapt. No, it didn't climb. It jumped, 10 feet high, clearing the wall like it was nothing. The police and I stood there, stunned. For a moment, none of us said a word. Then, we scrambled out of the gate and into the sugarcane fields beyond, shining our flashlights in every direction. There were no clear tracks. The rain had washed most of them away, but the faint prints we did find didn't look normal. They weren't human footprints, more like claws, but not quite. We searched the fields for what felt like hours, but there was no sign of it. No blood, no trail, nothing. It was like it had vanished into thin air. The next morning I went back to the graveyard with the officers to take another look. The grave it had been digging was left half open, but nothing was missing. Even the coffin was untouched. Whatever it was, the events stopped after that night. No more disturbed graves, no more dead livestock. Some of the villagers said the thing got scared off, but I'm not so sure. Sometimes, I wonder if the whole thing was planned, like someone set it up to make us think it was something supernatural. Maybe it was just a really clever thief who knew how to manipulate fear. Or maybe it really was something else, something we're better off not knowing about. I don't talk about that night much. Even now, years later, it still gives me chills. But every now and then when it rains at night, I think about that scream and the way it jumped that wall. Whatever it was, I hope I never see it again.